Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to Life on Purpose. I invite you to join in on this journey to live a life of deep meaning and intention. So today I am so glad to have my friend James Christensen on with me. And James, I knew before his Air Force career and life. And so I am so grateful to be able to catch up with him. And I'm grateful for him to share some of what he does now with you because I think it is so powerful. But let me tell you a little bit about James. He is a licensed marriage and family therapist working right now in California with couples. He helps couples when they're struggling with manipulation, gaslighting, deception, and betrayal. Such really heavy things. So I definitely want to come back to that. And he focuses on some of the most difficult and high conflict relationships. And he is a retired Air Force pilot, a father of 4 children, and been married for 22 years. And I just love that I've known you for so long, James, and seen this huge evolution of where we used to be as young kids and, now through careers and changes and family. It's so cool. But I also kind of stalked your website and I wanted to share some of these things that I think are I just respect these so much. Your education and training is in psychology, EMDR trauma therapy, accelerated resolution trauma therapy, Gottman couples therapy, generative trance therapy, and Snarch crucible couples therapy. And wow, that's a lot.
Yeah,
I
I can't stop. It's much more a passion for me than luckily being retired from the Air Force, I can kind of afford to do whatever I want to do. And this is just what I want to do. So it's the most interesting thing in the world to me. So yeah, I'm not
wow.
going to stop doing trainings forever. So I'll just keep learning.
No, I think that's so amazing because you are continuing your growth. You're continuing what you have to offer to others as well in such a huge wide variety of being able to focus on what they need in their relationship. So, I would love to first ask you this. Why? Why do you focus on the really most difficult and high conflict relationships with these really heavy and really difficult things to navigate? Why is that one of your passions?
The thing is just because it was so hard for my wife and I had a pretty rough marriage and it was really hard for us. We went to a lot of marriage therapists and our case was a lot harder than most of the cases. And so we saw people who worked with a lot of couples and had a lot of success and they weren't able to help us. We just had just a really difficult dynamic between us that was really hard to disrupt. And
Mm.
so um eventually found some people who could help us. And I was like, okay, I want to do what those people do. I want to be able to help the couples that most therapists can't help. And so it's kind of how I landed on that.
Wow. That is so amazing. Thank you for sharing that. And I love when passions come out of our own experience because we can really relate to what other people are experiencing in their own lives.
Yeah, very much. It's been me following my own journey. That's the whole reason I got into mental health and specifically into couples work. It's just that marriage has been hard for me and also very important to me. And I really, really wish I could have found some of the answers and the explanations a lot earlier in life instead of. It took us a long time to figure
Mm.
things out. So
So
yeah,
you are bringing hope and help in the way that you can and feel passionate about. And I think that that is just should be really applauded. And I really appreciate that. So I'm excited to talk more about what you do and how you help people. How have you found that helping people with their marriages or you with your own marriage, how has that changed your life purpose? Or how do you see that that changes others in living
yeah,
their
it is becoming. I'd say my purpose in the earlier part of my life was just to be a dad, and so that was what I was passionate about. And my military career was just kind of a job for me. I was never super passionate. I enjoyed it, but it was never really my primary focus in life. And so I was one of my therapists suggested, he's like, James, you're the amount to which you're interested in the process and the mechanisms of therapy is unusual. You should consider this as a second career. And so I was like, oh, and as soon as he said, I mean, eventually I just couldn't get that idea out of my head. And so that's why I pursued it. But it is, I do think that, especially as we get into our 30s and 40s, it's really important to have a purpose in life and to have a meaning in life. Whereas, in your 20s and 30s and before that, it's fine to just kind of find your place in society, find your place in the church, find your place in your family. There's all these roles that are given to us, and that works really good for about 30 to 40 years, and then it just stops working. And I mean, I've experienced this. Everyone I know has experienced this, where in the middle of life, we have to make a switch to a purpose-driven life. And I did have, parenting was my purpose, and that was awesome for me. But my youngest is 13 now, and she doesn't really want more than a few minutes a day from me. And so, if I just try to continue like smothering her with all my amazing parenting skills, she'd be like, "Dad, stop." So I have to find something else. And for me, that's therapy. And it's not going to be, it's not going to be for everyone. We each have to find our own thing. But I think it's important to find something that's both significant and worth doing and difficult. I think facing challenges is critical to having a satisfying life. So
Whoa. Okay. I want to delve into a little more to what you said about that. So, what do you think shifts? So, you're talking about how in our 20s and 30s, maybe we have these
defined
roles.
rules, predefined
Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
And what shifts? Like, so the kids get older. We're kind of in the same life scenario where our kids are getting older, they're more independent. Do you think it's children? But what else? What else
I think it's more
changes during
internal.
that
I think
time?
that when we're young, we don't have a choice. Like, it's not like, when I'm a teenager or even a young adult, I don't have the wisdom and the experience in me to guide my own life. And if I try to do that, I'm going to
Mm,
go off the rails. And so it's really good to have structures. For me, it was the military and it was church and it was my family. I had all this structure that said, go here, do this, be this person. And it was really good for me. I needed that. In fact, I sought that out. I joined the military because of that.
mhm.
Um, and to the same extent that that was really useful to me when I was young, it would be really harmful to me now, because now I have experience and I have wisdom, and it's really important for me to take a look inside and follow my own compass and my own guidance, and to find my own purpose and who do I want to become,
Mm.
and even to evaluate myself and say, am I really giving my best to this work? Can I do better? Um, Instead of looking to someone else. When I was a pilot, and so as a pilot, you're always graded, and every year you have to take a check ride, and some of you were good enough, you weren't good enough. Um, and now I'm the one who gives my check rides. I work for myself, I own my own company, and no one evaluates me.
Mhm.
But I look at the mirror at the end of the day and say, was there something more I could have done for that couple? Right? Did I miss an opportunity? If I could be stronger, could I help this couple that I wasn't able to help?
Oh, wow. That is really internal work.
Yeah.
Ooh, giving feedback to yourself. So, what do you think maybe stops people in that time of transition when you are moving to maybe midlife? Do you think there are things that stop people from, you were mentioning a purpose that also gives you growth, right? So that's going to give you that kind of stickiness a little bit of push versus your passion. Do you see things that make people just want to continue and glide along and not really embrace what you're
Probably the
talking
biggest
about?
one is actually marriage.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So marriage can be like a really sticky, it can and can't. So marriage, if we approach it well, it can be a very powerful source of growth and development.
Mm,
But it also has a tendency, because, I have a tendency to try to get all the things I was talking about getting from myself, my own validation and approval and my own evaluation, and looking to myself to say, who do I want to be? It's really tempting for me to just look to my wife instead and say, well, who do you want me to be? How am I doing? Please tell me I'm doing a good job. And so to the extent that I continue seeking that validation and guidance and authority from her, um, I'm never going to turn inward. And it can be self reinforcing, because because she's going to refuse to give that. And then I'm going to push harder for it. And I can get stuck in this back and forth, which is, your average marriage. And it's really not fun. So that can be one. Another one, I mean, I grew up in a high demand religion, and certain religions make it hard for us to make that turn inward and say, who do I want to be, as opposed to who does someone else tell me to be. And even if the answer is the same person, maybe I do want to be the same person that someone else wants me to be, but it's still important for me to be doing that because I think it's right, not because someone else thinks it's right. Whereas when I was young, it was important for me to do what someone else thought was right because I didn't know. I didn't have a clue. I
Mm.
mean, you're 15 years old or whatever, you don't know anything. And so it's important to follow someone else's guidance. But when I'm 45, it's important to make that shift.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I have noticed, and maybe you can speak to this, that marriage also does kind of go through an evolution. And around midlife, what I'm finding is we were busy with the kids and the career and the doing, right? And you get so busy and you have a marriage that works within that structure. And
Yes.
then as you do kind of transition to midlife where I am now, it's almost as if you need a shift to the relationship, a change to how it functions because the things that worked before are not working anymore. And I'm wondering, do you have other transitions later in life? Have you noticed how marriages are can successfully make those transitions?
It can be done. It's usually probably the most common thing that happens is the marriage reaches some kind of a breaking point. And so
Mm,
one person starts to consider leaving the relationship, or someone's really unhappy, or maybe there's an affair, or something else. Maybe something happens with one of the children, you know.
mm.
But usually, if the system is functioning well enough to sustain itself, something has to break before it can be rebuilt. So
Oh,
so that would usually be the trigger. Sometimes couples just come in and say, "Hey, our marriage is fine, and we think it could be a lot better, and let's work on that."
mm.
But usually it's some sort of crisis.
Wow. So that growth is what is going to transition into the next phase of like reinvention, really, right? Of what the
Mhm.
relationship is going to be. I would love to talk to you more about the what you just mentioned with a couple that comes in and says, things are okay. I mean, do you get a lot of those? Because I think there's a whole stigma around therapy in general, right? And
Yeah.
mental health and marriage health, and I'm so glad we're talking about this because in reality, if a marriage doesn't have some kind of push and pull, are you really how deep is that relationship? How vulnerable is that relationship going to be, right? And so let's be real that all relationships have some stickiness to them that and if we care about the relationship, we want that to be worked out. We want to have deep, meaningful relationships. And so, first of all, do you have couples who come in and say that? I hope you do. I hope everyone seeks
Mhm.
out things to make your life better, no matter how good it is. And then how do you direct them to like how do you make a good relationship even better?
So it's not very many. So most of the
Okay.
couples I see are in crisis. And like you said, culturally, you don't go to therapy until it's too late, but not necessarily too late, but till it's almost too late, right? So I have a couple who came in, they've only been together for 18 months. I was like, thank you for coming. 18 months is so much better than 18 years. If you've been kind of slowly stabbing each other for 18 years, it's really hard to unwind that. It's
Yeah.
possible, but so much easier if you've only been stabbing each other for a few months rather than
Yeah.
18 years. And I mean stabbing metaphorically, but
Yes.
um let's see. The fundamental tension here is between belonging to myself and belonging to my spouse. So we all have two kind of primary drives in life, which is I want to be true to me, but I want to belong to you. I want to be yours and I want to be mine. And so this is the theory. Bowen's theory of differentiation says that the only way to belong both to myself and to another person is to grow into the capacity to handle both of those at the same time. And that's
Mm,
something that happens to us usually a little bit later in life. And depending on what kind of family I came from, it might be really difficult. It might be a little bit easier. Kind of like as a kid, I basically inherit all of my parents' emotional maturity for free. So it's like if I grow up in a rich family, I inherit money, right? If I grow up in an emotionally mature family, I inherit emotional maturity. And so we kind of bequeath that, whatever we develop while we're raising children, we give that to our children, which is a very valuable thing. Whatever our parents didn't figure out, we have to figure out for ourselves. And that's where the challenge lies. And so that's, can I be true to who I am and still belong to you? And so I was not ready to do that when I got married. So I took into marriage this model of I'm going to overtly accommodate you, and then I'm going to resent you behind your back. And so it's called resentful accommodation, which is I will overtly be the perfect partner, and I'm going to hate you for it. I mean, hate
wow.
might be maybe slightly strong, but there was some pretty strong resentment there.
Yeah.
And I learned that model in my own home, but
Okay.
it doesn't work as you can imagine. that's
Yeah.
that's not
Yeah.
the solution. I really did think that was the solution. That was coming into marriage. I was like, well, I can handle this. I can accommodate. I can back off. I can not stand up for what I want. I can basically not be a person in the relationship. Um, but there was a lot of unkindness and a lot of anger and a lot of kind of revenge associated with that. Because
Yeah.
in the end, I did have to find a way to belong to myself, and the way I found was kind of sneaky and vile. So it's kind of how that went,
Interesting.
as you can
Yeah.
imagine.
Well, and we know that all action is either a an action of love or a cry out for love. And
Yeah.
so sometimes we do these things just because we don't even know how to manage our own emotions, and we are crying out for love and attention, not in a helpful or healthy way. And so that's us trying to figure things out on our own without mechanisms that can help us. So I I appreciate you sharing the the depth of your journey and where you've come from, and I just really appreciate that. And where, like, where are you now? How do you look back on where you came from, and how do you view that now? Like, from the viewpoint of James, I know what I know now. I have
Mhm.
set aside my family stuff, my
Mhm.
wife's family stuff that she brought,
Mhm.
other influences, right? From society, from church, from wherever they come from. How do you view that?
I mean, part of it is just you have to grow in through decades of experience, right? At the same time, you know, yeah, it would have been really nice to have, some basic understanding of what was happening, what the actual dynamics in the marriage were from the get-go. Because I mean, my approach was basically I blamed my wife for everything.
Mm,
The marriage was rough and even in the early years, and in my mind, it's all her fault. And that's pretty
yeah.
typical. The problem with that is it's a very low power perspective where if everything's her fault, I can't do anything about it. And so I'm just a helpless victim, which isn't true, of course. And if I could have had access to someone who could have helped me see, well, this is what you can do about it, then I could have done something about it. But I was pretty good at convincing myself that there wasn't anything for me to do. And so like one of the first things I do with couples is, I say, I will talk to you about you and I will talk to you about you. I will not talk to you about your partner because it's a waste of
Wow.
time. And so we always start every session. The first session starts with, well, she does this, he does this. That's fine. I'll let that go on for about 5 minutes. It has to start somewhere. But then I'll say, just so you know, you can only change you and you can only change you. And I'm not going to talk to you about the other person because we're just wasting our time because there's nothing you can do about that. So,
Wow. Wow. So it sounds like you're really starting from shifting awareness from what the other person's doing to awareness with yourself.
yeah.
And
And there's
how do
always a
you build
balance,
that?
so if I'm married to someone who's like um very immature, for example, that means that I am also operating at the same level of immaturity. Like if I'm out dating and I happen to go meet some woman who's like incredibly grown up and mature, she's going to not be interested in me, you know? So
Mm,
there's this equality that happens because we partner up at our own level of development. And then even after we're married, we grow or stagnate together. And so what you never see is you never see a couple, well, one person's operating at this very high level of development, the other person is not. Just doesn't exist,
interesting.
which means that it's so easy for me to look across and see, oh, my wife does this, 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 and this. What I can't see is the equivalent stuff on my side. And so that's where, a really, really competent professional can say, well, I can show you. I can help you see how you are contributing to the difficulty in your marriage.
Oh, wow. So what do you suggest for people who are in marriages and are just looking at the other person? Do you have things to suggest for someone to build their awareness within their own marriage? And, like, how do they start looking at themselves when they have just come from a place of pointing fingers?
So a good place to this is gonna a good place to start is with a piece of tape, right? So you take a piece of tape and you put it over your mouth, and then you write down and you say, "What is hard about being married to me?" And then you don't
Oh,
take the tape
wow.
off until they're done talking. Now, that's not an easy thing to do, but
Wow.
it's really, really hard for me to hear, my wife's perspective on what it's like to be married to me. And I disagree strongly, but that's one of the best sources. It's not like she's going to see me completely accurately, but there will almost certainly be some truth in that. And if I can sit still long enough to pay attention to what's true in it, even if it's only 10% true, that's something that I have power over. And that's something I can change. Whereas if I just focus on all the things that she needs to change, you know, once again, I'm just pouring my energy into somewhere where it has no effect.
Whoa. That takes a lot of courage to be
Does.
able to.
We're not used to operating that way. The thing is
No.
that marriage is just really hard. Um, I mean, kind of the way I see it is that human beings are only barely capable of marriage. And
Mm,
so we step into this like, yay, happily ever after, let's get married. And what we don't know is that we're like, it's like, let's climb Mount Everest every day for the next 5 million days, right? It's
yeah.
really hard. If I want to have a really, really enjoyable, thriving marriage, I need to know what I'm signing up for, which is that I'm going to have to grow myself up so much and I'm going to have to shave off so many rough edges. And I'm going to have to look at myself in the mirror and realize, wow, I'm not being the kind of person I want to be. And I'm going to have to do that 1,000 times. And there just is no other way because marriage is challenging. Marriage asks more of us than what we're usually willing to give. It's not impossible, but if you look around at all the couples like how many really, really enjoy each other on a daily basis?
Mhm,
It's not a lot.
mhm.
Um, and it's not because they're bad people. It's just
Mm.
because marriage is really hard. And so, if I'm willing to put in the work and if I'm lucky enough to find the right resources, yes, absolutely possible. Um, but it's like I know people who run 3-hour marathons too. Just because they can run a 3-hour marathon doesn't mean that I'm going to run a 3-hour marathon. And part of that is that I just don't care about it enough. So it's something if I want to have a thriving marriage, it has to be my number one priority. Like there's just no other way. It's so difficult that it has to be on the top of my list all the time, or it's just never going to happen.
Whoa. That was a lot. That
Mhm.
was a lot that I felt as you were speaking that. Just the reality of how inequipped we all are just in our own natural selves when we do think. We just okay, you get married and you just figure it out as you go along. And how many people probably just are pretending from the outside that everything is okay and things are fine, and there's so much more fulfillment that probably is available to them if they're willing to do the work. And I loved how you are saying about how if it's the most important thing, then you're going to do that really
Yeah.
deep work that you are totally not equipped for naturally, or like you just don't have that sometimes the resources or the knowledge just at your fingertips, especially when we've had, examples like my own family of divorce and not great communication skills and habits that we build. And so I really appreciate just that opening up to let's all be really real about the amount of work that it takes to be with another human that you want to truly enjoy on a really deep and personal level. So important.
Mhm.
I love that.
And one of my favorite theorists, David Schnarch, he always says, nothing's going right. People would say, well, what's going wrong in our marriage? He's like, nothing. Everything's going right. He's like, this is just what marriage is. He's like, this is your marriage is demanding that you grow yourselves up. And to the extent that you refuse that demand, you're going to be miserable. He's like, that is the mechanism of marriage. Nothing's going wrong. It's operating perfectly. And
Oh,
that's just the way marriage works.
this is what it looks like while we're
Exactly.
growing ourselves. And I
Yes.
love that. How much more acceptance can we have when we're just like, this is what it looks like. This is the this is the mess while we're figuring things out. I
We need
love
Disney
that.
to make a cartoon about it, about
Yeah.
what happily. Okay, you got married. Yay, her. Okay, this is what marriage is about. For the next 40 years, you're going to be continually facing your own inability to love another person.
Wow.
That's what marriage is about. And
Wow.
it's not just me, it's not just you, it's everyone. That the fact is that, we don't just magically inherit this ability to love someone. Now, if I had amazing parents, to the extent that I had amazing parents, yes, I did inherit a little bit of that. In a normal family, like what my children inherited, for example, is they need to figure a lot of that out on their own. And so
Mm,
that's just kind of the challenge we face in life.
wow. Okay, so let's talk about some of the communication things that you talk about. I love the little messages you put on Facebook about little communication tips and things to just be aware of. Obviously, in a little video, you're not going deep into depth of therapeutic, knowledge and things that you know. But what are some of your little tips that you give to people to maybe intentionally communicate in a better way?
So the first one I usually say is turn your complaint into a request. So if my partner is not doing something I want them to do, or they are doing something I don't want them to do, my instinct is to complain about that. And so I say, you didn't do that, you did do this, you never do this, you always do that. Those are all complaints. The problem with the complaint is there's two problems really. First, it's in the past, and I can't change the past. So I can complain to my wife about the past a million times, and it doesn't change anything because it's about the past. The second is that a complaint carries this negative energy, right? There's something wrong with you. You're a bad. It almost says you're a bad person. It's almost like the purpose of the complaint is actually to kind of make you feel bad in a way. And so I take that same message. What do I want? I want my partner to do something. So I turn it into request and I say, I would like you to do that. And it's a lot harder because I have to think, what does it actually look like for my partner to do what I want them to do? And I have to put it into the future. And then we all know that, the most effective way to get someone to do something is to ask nicely. And so if I say, well, why don't you don't do, why don't you just don't do that? Or why don't you do that? If I bring this negative energy, I'm pouring that black energy into my partner and they're just going to rebel and say no. And it makes it less likely. It's like if you go to a burger chain and you ask for a burger rudely, they're going to spit in your burger. They're going to spit in your
Mm,
food, right? And so if I if I bring my negative energy to my partner, I'm going to get negative energy back. Um, but that means that I have to deal with myself first. So I have to realize, okay, I'm feeling anxiety, I'm feeling whatever, I'm feeling some stuff. And if I bring that energy to my partner, my chances of getting what I want are actually lower than if I can deal with my energy first, grow myself up, um, handle myself like an adult, and then make a friendly request. So the friendly request is the big solution. But once again, this requires a lot of personal growth. It doesn't come naturally.
wow. Wow. When dealing because you deal with such heavy topics like, manipulation, gaslighting, deception, betrayal, how how does a partner do you have recommendations for how does a partner kind of deal with that in a way where they can be true to themselves and recognize that maybe what's happening with communication or breakdowns in actions, how can they be an adult and not revert back into their own things when you might be faced with some of that?
Mhm. So one technique is to share instead of convincing or reveal. And so let's say my partner's doing something I don't like. I could reveal, say, I think that you have been doing this, or my
Mm.
perception. I often talk in terms of perception and preference. So my
Oh,
perception is that you tend to do this thing. That's my perception. And it's powerful to say perception because my partner might disagree. Well, they probably do disagree. They're then expressing their perception. So I'm going to separate my perception from your perception. My perception is you do this. Well, I don't, right? Which is your perception. Once again,
okay.
my perception is that you do this. So we're just going to separate that from the get go. My
Got it.
preference is that you stop. Well, I don't. Once again, my preference is that you stop. And so by owning my preference and perception, I'm standing up on my own 2 feet and saying, this is how I see you, and this is what I want from you. And the fact that you disagree doesn't change that this is how I see you and this is what I want for you. Now, realistically, they're probably still going to say no, depending on what's going on over there. But
Okay.
it's still really useful for me to stand up for myself and to voice myself clearly. Um, what I don't want to do is I don't want to get sucked into the trap of justifying or explaining. So they might say, why? And the answer is because that's what I want.
Oh, I see.
Um, it's so easy to drag. I mean, my teenage kids do this. I'd like you to clean your room. Why? I'm sorry, but that's not a valid question. I want you to clean your room because I want you to clean your room. And it's not a sincere question. They're not actually curious about my reasons. They're just protesting. And so it's pretty easy. Oh, let's see. There's one other thing, which is, can I stand fast and rely on the way I see the world? And so if I say my perception is A and partner says my perception is B, I'm going to hold on to A because that's what I see. Now I'm going to be curious about what my partner's saying, but I'm not going to allow my partner to define how I should see the world.
Mm.
I'm going to say, I understand that you see the world in this way, and also I still see the world in this way. Does that kind
Okay.
of see what I'm getting at? So we're
Yes.
we're separating out the multiple points of view and the multiple preferences that we have.
Yeah. I love that our perspective can be separate from our preference because I could have a perspective that, oh, what you're doing, I might be feeling upset about that. And that's my perspective, or my perspective be, oh, you don't care about me because of this. Right.
Mhm.
And that's just a perspective. That's not even a fact. And you can separate that out from the preference of, oh, this the way we talk about this or the way that this happens, that would be my preference. And that's something someone can do something about, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
You can also like I guess I'm cautious about the way we tend to share feelings with each other, but it can be useful.
Okay, tell me about
A
that.
lot a lot of the time if I'm sharing feelings with my partner, I'm trying to transfer responsibility for what I feel to them, and that's not
Oh,
helpful. So when I feel things, that's 100% my responsibility.
okay.
One time when it can be helpful is, um, you know, um, I was sad after you said this thing last night. So what
Okay.
I'm doing is I'm revealing you did something and my body responded this way. And
Mm,
so what I'm not doing is saying it's your responsibility to keep me from being sad. And so it's kind of a slippery slope there where a lot of the times when people are talking about feelings, they're implying that you need to keep me from feeling things I don't want to feel, which doesn't work. And so I could say, I was really sad after you said this last night or after you did this last night, um, with the implication that it's okay for me to be sad. So
Okay.
I'm revealing myself to you. What I'm not doing is saying, you need to make sure I don't ever feel sad again, because that's a transferred responsibility.
Oh, wow. That's that is so good because yeah, you've made me think about how sometimes even if I say I feel sad about this situation, the other person automatically feels like, "Oh, I need to make that better." And what if
Yeah.
they can't? Or what if their actions actually make it worse? No. But I love that distinction about I am allowed to have like I am owning this feeling. It's
Mhm.
my feeling. You
Yeah.
don't need to do anything about it, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and I could still request, you could say, "I was sad." Let's say we go to a party and you say something that I think is demeaning. So,
Okay.
"Hey, last night when you said this to this person, I was really sad." And I could
Okay.
even go further. I could say, and I could bring in a perception. I think that you said that thing because you wanted to hurt me, if that's what I think, right? So
Okay.
now I'm saying, this is how I see you. I don't think this was accidental. Now,
Okay.
my partner is almost always going to come back and say, "Oh, no, I didn't mean to." And
Okay.
once again, this comes back to their perception from my perception. Um, if that's what I think, it's what I think, right? And so I'm holding on to my well, that's the way I see you. I understand you see yourself differently. That's fine. Um, I guess it comes down to this idea that because I'm an adult, I can handle being sad.
Mm,
So if I were 5 years old, I really needed my parent to protect me from the world.
mm,
Like that was actually true. I couldn't take care of myself, not just physically, but emotionally. Now, as an adult, I can take care of myself both physically and emotionally. And so if you go around saying mean things about me to other people, um, I'm sad about that. And I'm going to be okay.
yeah.
That
Oh, I
kind of makes
love that.
sense.
I'm going to be okay.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, and knowing that we can have that responsibility of our own emotions and not place that weight on our partner.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really good. And that is why we need people like you to teach us about these important relationships. Now, you're in the business of healing relationships, making relationships the best they can be, but is there ever a time that you just recommend like, you know what? It's time to let this relationship have its conclusion.
Yeah,
Is there a point
I
where
don't
you
think I would recommend that, but I do, like, I start from the very beginning. About half the couples I see, at least one of them is considering leaving. And
Oh, okay.
so I start out from the very beginning and I say, um, you have a big choice and a little choice. And the
Okay.
little choice is, do you stay together? And the big choice is, how do you show up in whatever relationship you have?
Oh,
Especially if they have children together, just divorcing doesn't get rid of this person. If you
mm,
have a child with someone, you're stuck with that person to a certain extent for a long time.
yeah.
And the way you show up in your relationship with that person, whether you're still married or not, is very important, and it's 100% under your control. And so I start right off the bat. The other thing I often say is, if you have one foot out the door, um, I'm going to suggest that you wait a few months and let's work together, and let me help you improve the way you are showing up as a partner, and then make your decision. And the courthouse is open 5 days a week, and you can always file another day. And I don't ever try to talk people out of divorce. Um, Sometimes it is the best option of sucky options available. So I don't try to talk people out of it. I just want to be realistic that your distress is not going to disappear just because you got a divorce. You're still going to have to deal with life. If you have children, you're still going to have to deal with this person. And what's in your power is how much change can you affect within yourself.
Wow.
Yeah.
Really turning inward. I love what you said about how just ending the relationship with divorce is not going to make these difficult emotions go away. I really appreciate that perspective of because it's because it's really going back to the internal. The reason you're feeling upset and really hurt is sometimes how you are showing up in the relationship, right?
Definitely contributes to it. I usually see it as 50-50. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just that we each have tendency we tend to put in about half of the dysfunction into the relationship. So it's even Stevens.
Wow, that's a great perspective. Well, I want to ask you about what you are doing in your life right now to live a life on purpose. What is a practice you do, or what is something that you feel like is helping you live your life in a purposeful and meaningful way?
Hmm. One thing that's helped me a lot is learning to care for. I mean, I call it childhood survival instincts. You could also just call it an emotional flashback where my whole life, have had these intense, very uncomfortable physical sensations in my chest. And you could call it a trauma flashback. You could call it a trigger, whatever. It's it's a physical pain in my chest that's saying, I'm not okay, I'm not okay, I'm not okay. And most of my life, those those physical symptoms, that discomfort shaped a lot of my action, where I was constantly modifying the way I lived in an effort to avoid feeling that uncomfortable feeling. And so, what I've learned recently is instead, I can open myself up to saying, well, I'm going to allow my body to feel what it needs to feel, even if it hurts, even if it's uncomfortable. And then I'm going to do what I think is best, regardless of how much pain it causes. That sounds bad. Regardless of whether I'm going to face this emotional pain that's also a physical pain. Does that make
Mm.
sense?
Wow.
Because I think this is a survival instinct that's left over from childhood, when I really did need someone to take care of me. And I needed people to treat me a certain way because I was young and vulnerable. As an adult, I'm actually quite flexible where I can handle people treating me all sorts of different ways. Um, and so my chest is warning me saying, well, this person isn't treating you well, and so I want to be able to behave. Um, I want to be who I want to be instead of just like avoiding this discomfort in my chest. Does that kind of make sense?
Wow.
So I would say that helps me live a purposeful life because my purpose in life is not to avoid distress. My purpose in life is to um, be the best version of myself that I can be and to help other people along the way. Um, and when I live my life trying to avoid this distress, I kind of end up doing the opposite of that. I kind of end up bringing lots of pain and anger and sadness and all sorts of nonsense into the world. So it really matters that I follow my values and my courage and my kindness, and I don't follow this kind of emotional flashback that I have.
Oh, but it sounds like you're also not dismissing it or pushing it down, ignoring it. It sounds like you're really allowing it
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
honoring it as well for what it is, but not
Yeah.
making it who you become or not allowing that to give you an excuse to behave
Mm.
in a way you don't want to, in a way that you
Yeah.
know that is not authentically you.
But I mean, kind of my best understanding of it is that there's this like part of my brain that developed very early on in life, um, that was designed to help me maintain my survival relationship with my attachment figures. And that's what these sensations are. And so what I do is I'll just I actually put my hands physically over my heart and say, "It's okay, I'm here for you." Because I'm reaching out to the part of my brain that says, "I'm I'm not okay, I'm being abandoned, I'm not being cared for, something's wrong, someone's being mean." And I'll just be like, "It's okay, I'm here from you." Because there's a part of me, once going back to the 2-year-olds, right? There's a part of me that's very good at comforting a small child. And I really think this discomfort I have comes from the part of me that still like the part of my brain that's kind of still stuck in that idea of I'm small and vulnerable and powerless and I'm not okay. And so there's like two parts of my brain, and I like to try to let them get to know each other a little bit.
I love that. I love that picture, and I love that practice.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. That feels good to know that we have the skills within us to nurture those wounded little pieces of us
Yeah.
and to show up in our relationships in a more healthy and functional and happy way, the way that we want to, a way that we feel proud of, and a way that we can pass along to others. So, thank you for
Well,
sharing that. I
absolutely.
am so grateful to have been able to talk with you today, James, and for you to be so open about your journey and also your passions and what you are sharing with the rest of us. I know that I already am taking away some things I'm going to go share with Brian and to make our relationship even better and better. And so I am just so grateful to have had this conversation with you and for what you are bringing to the world. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. And thanks for having me.
I'm so glad. I want to share with you this, where you can find more work of James. He has a 30-minute relationship course, which I looked up. It looks fantastic. It's called Becoming an Adult in Relationship. Wow. That is super powerful. You can find that at therapyjames.com, and I will make sure and link to that and share all of the places that you can find James' work. And
And the
thank
course
you.
is free too. I'm not charging
Yes,
for it.
thank you for pointing that out. Everyone can afford that free course to help your marriage be even better and show up in a way that you feel good about in your relationships. So, thank you so much for sharing your experience and your learning. And I'm just so grateful. So, thank you.
It was a pleasure. So nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are ready to live your life with greater purpose and intention, check out my free Power of Vision workshop, where you'll uncover your life dream, eliminate doubt, and move forward toward your goals with confidence. Get instant access with the provided link. Your life is too precious to live just by chance or by default. I want you to live your life on purpose. I will see you next time.